VIPs today. I'm really happy and honored to introduce our speaker today. She's a fellow Rotarian, but most importantly and more special, she is also my friend. I could go on all day long with her accolades because she has many, but we've highlighted the best here for you. Lynne Wainfan, got that right. That's important. She's your friend too. She got her PhD from Iran. She also invented multi-perspective strategy methodology. I'll let her explain that one. She is a C, or she was, or is it current or you were?
What's that?
C-level.
What?
Was. She was a C-level executive at Boeing. She's taught leadership at LMU. She's also a screenwriter and a very, very good ballroom dancer. But most importantly, the coolest thing I love about Lynne is she's a rocket scientist, which I think is just the absolute coolest. And as well as she's a great role model, specifically for younger women and girls, and I admire her so much, and I wish that when I was growing up, or when my nieces were growing up, we had a role model like her. And so for that, as well as she's just a delightful person, I'm so honored to please welcome Dr. Lynne.
What an honor to be standing here. The world is in trouble. The 21st century has brought crises at a faster and faster rate. We had 9/11, COVID, shutdowns, violent protests, mass shootings, and now a country invades its neighbor with such brutality. It breaks your heart. And another country sits back and watches and learns how to do it better. These aren't the only changes that have occurred in the 21st century. Next slide, please. Oh, do I have it? Oh, we got it. Oh, hold on. Think about our elected officials. What are their values? Truth? Country? Courage? Well, the future is certainly unclear, but our elected officials seem to be selling fear. Health, immigration, racism, the environment. Both parties' platforms seem to be fear the other party. Do either of them have a vision for a better future? And if they did, how would they communicate it? Elected officials rely primarily on television and newspapers, yet 80% of us get our news from the internet. Between the internet's echo chambers and the speed of fake news, the 21st century has really changed communications. Let's talk about business and not-for-profit. They rely almost exclusively on meetings and emails still. On the average, millennials are coming into the workforce, and they are going to be 75% of the global workforce in 2 years. Millennials. How old are they? 27 to 42 years old now. And they have a lot of very positive qualities. They're empathetic, they're collaborative, but they need purpose. Now, what was our purpose when we were that age? Some of you still are. It was the American dream for me. Get married, have a career, buy a house, kids. Millennials, a lot of their relationships are virtual. And I call that the junk food of connectedness. You know, it feels really good to check my social media 100 times a day, but that's not what I need. Career? Let's talk career for millennials. You know, we think tech field, that's a good field to go in, right? That was my first degree. 107,000 tech jobs were cut last year. This is a challenge for them. They're delaying marriage, they're delaying having kids, and buying a house. Have you checked prices lately? Student debt? This is a real challenge. And not surprisingly, many of them are hopeless. Half of them, over half, live with their parents still. And the suicide rate among young people has tripled in 20 years. That's before COVID. They above all understand that the top-down hierarchical structure that many organizations still have is not going to keep pace with these 21st century changes and accelerating crises. They know that we all know we need to shift the responsibility down to the teams, especially the collaboration teams. But it's hard to do that. I mean, it's a good idea and we do it a little bit. But for instance, is the state government set up to shift responsibilities down to local officials? Kind of tough. Have any of these challenges affected you or your organization? These challenges require 21st century leadership. Okay. These principles, I developed them from academic research, case studies, the previous one, sorry. Case studies, and my own application of the principles. Now, there are leaders out there who are facing overwhelming odds with courage. Government, not-for-profit business leaders who are doing this. I'll give an example on the next chart. They have a vision that inspires others. Do you have a vision for your organization? Does it inspire your people? 21st century leaders communicate that vision compellingly to followers. Our elected officials communicate almost exclusively by television and newspaper. We get our news on the internet. Business and not-for-profit, email and meetings. What engages millennials? Videos, stories, chat rooms, discussion boards, blogs, social media. 21st century leaders turn followers into committed people who go above and beyond with their own resources, time, money, effort, bandwidth. As leaders, do we tie our vision to our people's purpose in life? Do we know what our people's purpose in life is? Do they have a purpose? 21st century leaders, as you all know, adapt. We have to adapt. Supply chain problems? Find another way. Wage regulations creeping up? Deal. Millennials in the workforce? Adapt. Now these principles sound kind of hard to implement, don't they? They sound good on paper and yeah, we're doing that, sort of. But I'm going to show you an example of a 21st century leader who's doing it. And I've chosen this leader because you are all familiar with his work. President Zelenskyy is a 21st century leader. Would you agree?
Yes.
He faced overwhelming odds, didn't he? The Russian army outmanned and outgunned the Ukrainian military by a factor of 10 to 1. Courage? I need ammunition, not a ride. Is that a great statement? He visits soldiers to thank them at the front line. My favorite quote, "We do not afraid." They don't, do they? His vision, "This is our home. We are protecting our land, our homes, for the sake of our children." This vision, plus his courage, has inspired the Western world, hasn't it? President Zelenskyy communicates through multiple channels. Of course, he gives speeches to governing bodies, and Golden Globes, and the Academy Awards, and all these groups of people. But what he really does is he attracts followers primarily on social media. He has nightly addresses. He does selfie videos of himself. And he encourages his military to post videos, the horrors of the war, but also soldiers dancing, showing their morale, rescuing kittens. He knows how to use social media. President Zelenskyy aligns his message to the audience's purpose. To other countries, he said, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was intended only as a beginning. They want to capture other countries. Talk about a purpose. His speech to Congress, best speech I've ever heard or read in my life. He invoked Martin Luther King, 9/11, the American Revolution. Now, crowdsourcing, you all know what that is. You have a need, you put it out there to individuals, to the public, and if they're so inspired, they self-organize, and they figure out how to meet that need. It's really awesome. Ukraine has crowdsourced funding, weapons, intel, supplies, training, fighting, search and rescue, medical care, drones, evac, catching war criminals. They've crowdsourced satellites. My favorite, crowdsourced volunteer organization. Organization doesn't exactly exist. They don't have individuals leading it. They don't have an institution. They don't have an address. The Anonymous Hacking Group. It's called Anonymous. They're incredible. They hacked Russian TV, and they put up video and news from Ukraine. And my favorite, they hacked Putin's yacht. And they changed its maritime call sign to FCK PTN. And its destination, hell. They're amazing. A 21st century leader adapts the message, requests, tactics, operations, training, equipment. President Zelenskyy has done adapted his sourcing, crowdsourcing. What are the results of President Zelensky's 21st century leadership? Well, an invasion that was supposed to be over in 3 days has outperformed that by a factor of 100. 76 countries have donated over $500 billion in aid. Not bad, huh? All right, so I'm no Zelenskyy, obviously, but I'd like to show you how I've applied these principles to my own personal crisis. Next slide. A number of years ago, I found myself a divorcee, empty nester in a large, large house. I was lonely, very lonely. And I went on the internet. What do you do when you're lonely? And I tried the first thing, and it failed. And I tried the next thing, and it failed. And every time I tried something and failed, I just lost a little hope. And by the 14th thing I tried, I could tell I was in a nosedive, and I was losing the ability to have hope enough to climb out of it. And the only thing that kept me from crashing and burning was the realization, loneliness is hard. And when I figure this out, I'm going to help others. So I came up with a vision. Now, elements of this vision might be different for you than they are for a millennial, but let me give you my vision, my own personal vision. Perhaps you've had a situation like I have, where a loved one comes to you in a very deep hole and tells you exactly how they plan to end it all. What if you could jump in that hole with them and say, I'm here for you, and I love you, and I'll get you out. And I did. Or what if you have a friend? You have so much fun with this friend. You laugh till your stomach hurts over the silliest things. I was brothers in arms with this West Point graduate. We were shooting zombies at a video arcade, but you get the point. I won. That's a good kind of friend to have, and not a lot of people have that kind of friend. Or you have somebody who knows you so well, warts and all, and they still love you. And when you're not on this earth so much, they know what you're trying to do, and they carry on your legacy. That's connected. So how did I communicate elements of this vision to attract followers? Well, I wrote books on collaboration and trust. I was the license holder for TEDx SoCal. And I started an app. I've written an app to help people out of loneliness. Wrote a screenplay. I did stand-up comedy on the subject, believe it or not. And I joined social media. I have formed this committed, I call them the posse. 27 people working very part-time. 24 of them are volunteers or working for peanuts on the dollar. Among my volunteers, an Emmy winner, a Grammy winner, an Oscar winner. People get this message of connecting deeper with each other. My posse has documented saving over 29 people from suicide. Okay. We have adapted. Boy, have we adapted. Before we started the app, the loneliness app, we did 6 focus groups. Very helpful. The thing every group agreed on is we do not want a loneliness app on our phone. We don't want anybody to know that we're lonely. Fair enough. We pivoted. We're a friendship app now. We started the app. We tested 6 pieces of the prototype. We found we could not engage young adults. More than about 17 seconds on the average. Some hung in there, played the game, we had a game. Generally, we had trouble engaging. So I decided I'm going to do primary market research, and I'm going to go on TikTok and find out what engages young adults. I became a social media influencer. Go figure. So the adaptation was learning what influences people. And what we realized is that it isn't the app. No wonder it doesn't engage people. It's not the app. The app is a small part of something bigger. It's a community of people who want to connect with others deeper. So TikTok. Let's see, what are the results of this? TEDx SoCal has had 3 million views on the internet, on YouTube. Our screenplay won an award, and we're in negotiations with a studio to produce it. It's a cool story. It's a cool story on its own. It's a cold-blooded killer who learns how to love somebody enough to die for them. It's an instruction manual. For my personal videos about connectedness, over 500,000 people have seen them. And we had our first live session. The live session was, are you alone on Christmas Eve? Join us. We'll do trivia, we'll do jokes, we'll have a conversation. So many people said this saved their Christmas. They lost their wife, their kids, their dog. They were dreading Christmas. We got 42,000 likes. We're forming a community. This community is giving and telling us we're on the right track. And it's only a start. So I hope you've appreciated how I've given you some specific examples of how these principles can be implemented. And if you have any questions about 21st century leaders, I'm here for you.
If it's okay, we usually have about 5 to 10 minutes for some Q&A if you're up for it. Wonderful. All right.
Very quick question. Can you expound a little bit on your thoughts of Elon Musk?
He has a definite 21st century leadership. Another trait is genuineness. I mean, when you see me or Zelenskyy, we're just talking, right? I mean, this is what we believe in. There's no subterfuge. There's no, where did I have to appeal to my base? And Musk is genuine, isn't he? He has visions. I mean, my personal favorite, let's send people into space. I'm on a wait list, by the way. So Musk is a 21st century leader. He has some challenges, you know, but he's appealed to millennials. He's great. He's a business example of it, absolutely. No other questions? We're all ready to go.
Yeah.
Is that a question or
There you go.
look over here for a photo?
Question? Thank you very much for very warm words about my president. And I would like to give you, from me and my wife, a portrait of Mr. Zelenskyy. Thank you very much.
William. Igor, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, we got one.
Get you back up here. I have a specific viewpoint on leadership that there is a completeness to leadership that a lot of generations or past leaders have failed to put all the component parts in to make leadership properly work, which is alignment of purpose and common goals, all those things. And so we have, what I've seen, we've had the tendency sometimes to like say, this is this generation's leadership style, where in fact, each generation is missing different components that all make it work from that standpoint. And so when we look at, I think the questions, I'm listening to what you're saying, I agree with the alignment of purpose and everything. Elon Musk is a great example. We also have this situation in society where people attain great wealth or success, and then what they do is actually disconnect from those people that got them there. We have millennial leaders now, and I'm saying I'm interested in your viewpoint on the leaders like, I can't remember the guy who started Twitter, what his name was, but Zuckerberg who started Facebook, and these people that, when they did become leaders, they had all the property around their houses, and they didn't want anybody to be close to them, but yet then they were professing that everybody needed to, they didn't live the values that they were professing for others and things like that. And so I don't think it's just a knife that cuts one way. I think it cuts both ways, that there's certain components to human nature that once you've got enough eggs in your barn, maybe you're not going to share all those with somebody else at some point. I don't know the question, but I think you get the concept. Can you comment on that?
I'm just going to talk extemporaneously because I love the subject. The foundation for every voluntary relationship, what do you guys think it is? Trust. Absolutely. Very good. You're smarter than my YouTube followers. People say listening, which is relevant to your point.
Right.
Trust. So what is trust? It's fairness, fundamentally. It's I'm going to trust that you're predictable, that you're competent, and you have values that I agree with. I wrote a book on this, by the way. So those three dimensions, okay, do you trust this person? And hypocrisy, that's a trust breaker. For a lot of people, not everybody. And people have different values. So like, my value for hypocrisy, maybe that's low on the list compared to I value inspiration, I value passion. So trust. If you can develop that trust, you're going to have great voluntary relationships. And that is not only the most important thing for leadership, for friendship, for any relationship, it is the hardest thing. We've all been betrayed, right? And when you're a kid and somebody kicks you on the playground, you say, I'm never going to trust that kind of person. I'm never going to trust women. Later, I'm not going to trust Republicans, Democrats, young people, I'm not. And your aperture of trust gets so small that if you live long enough, you won't trust anybody. So if you can be a leader who inspires the trust of your people, or if you are inspired enough to trust somebody that they have the predictability, competence, and values, there's the basis for a good relationship. Now, to your point, different generations, obviously, and it's really unfair to categorize millennials like I did. I'm just doing it for brevity. I was in a choir with a lot of millennials for several years recently. They're really amazing, but they're underappreciated, and they require purpose. They picked some purposes that we don't necessarily agree with, but they need it. Give it to them. Have your organization, have your vision tied to their purpose. But that means you have to understand their purpose first. And they're not a homogenous group, they're individuals. Did that get to some of the...
That's fine. I think they have a lot more to say. We have time, and I want you to expand on some of those.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with, you can't categorize people in groups or individuals, and individuals can change.
And they hate it. As a group, they hate being groups. So,
what women leaders or potential leaders did you see that we should be aware of?
well, we're struggling a little bit with that. The younger... I'm sorry?
New Zealand.
Well, yeah, until today. But she was amazing, right, Prime Minister. Greta I forget her last name. Yes, thank you. She is a 21st century leader. I mean, young, younger than millennial, I think, yeah. And she's amazing. But it starts with a vision. And it starts with having the values, the principles. You know, live what you say, be consistent, be predictable, be fair. Be fair. 4-way test. Brief story. Keiko Field and I were on a committee to develop a curriculum for Long Beach middle schoolers on ethics. And we used the 4-way test as our structure, of course. And so this extremely august group got together and said, all right, we're gonna have a lesson on truth. And we came up with something, we're gonna have a lesson on fairness. What is fairness? And we looked around the table and was like, what is fairness? How do you treat people fairly if you don't know what fairness is? Fairness, we figured out eventually, is behavior that follows the rules. Now the rules may not be the same between me and you, or they may not be written down, but if you think somebody follows the rules, they're being fair and you're going to be more likely to trust them. So those are kind of the general thoughts I have. Vision, values. Vision and values. And one of the values, courage. How are we doing on time? You good?
Can I ask another question?
I would love it.
Okay, one of the, I'm interested in this aspect, your viewpoint on this, because one of the things that I've seen in, it just says a lot of organizations look at labor as an expense instead of an asset. And I'm a free market, rugged individualist, personal responsibility type guy, okay? And that's where I am. But at the same token, I hated working for businesses where I worked my butt off and the shareholders and the senior executives got millions of dollars and I didn't hardly get anything. I wanted to win at that game too, and I really feel in order to, I would say, how hard would an NFL team play if the owner was the only one who got the Super Bowl ring? Okay? They play because they want to win, and creating a team where everybody wins and everybody's compensated for their winning. Do you have any communication from that standpoint? Any viewpoints on that?
Just, I'll start with personal. I used to be an engineer, and I almost wrote a book, The Commoditization of Knowledge Workers, because we were treated as human resources. I'm like, that's a step back, that title. I'm not just a resource. I'm a personnel. I like that much better. So that was key. And I gotta be honest with you, compensation was never one of my big values. I wanted purpose, I wanted passion, I wanted to be an astronaut, okay? My whole life has been trying to see the bigger and bigger picture. And I was rewarded for that very well at Hughes. I got to do global telecom design, that's pretty good. But it depends on your values. What do you value? If it's money, how do we do it? And people, when they see that their values are not consistent with what reward they're getting, it's unfair. And that's when you lose them. That's absolutely when you lose them. So it turns out in the 21st century, and for millennials, the relationship is key, absolutely key. You're not gonna keep them if you have the old, I'm the boss, and here's what you do, and here's your reward. It's just not gonna work. Did that kind of answer your question?
Just a question with regards to what we're seeing today with people like Elizabeth Holmes and Bankman-Fried and the other young woman that use their professors in college to manipulate them to go and create these mega influence with regards to money and basically bilking millions and billions of dollars from very, they make Bernie Madoff look like a Boy Scout. How do you explain that? And again, this is the millennial group, so I want to see where the ethics is.
That's fair, and to be honest, I don't know, but let me talk briefly about it. If your purpose in life is to get married and have a career and a house and all that, you're gonna be kind of going after the money side of it, and you want the security. And so depending on people's purpose, even if they don't know what it is, subconsciously, maybe their parents influence them, their professors influence them, you're gonna go after that one way or another because people need purpose, and millennials especially. And so if that's the purpose, go after the money to get the most influence. And in fairness, you know, if their motives are pure, we want to influence people in a good way. I'm an influencer, I think that's a good thing. But it just depends on their purpose in life. And if they have a better purpose, maybe they'll direct it more towards things that we approve of, more toward ethics. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Fascinating. I love where you're going, and I have like 17 things I would actually love to talk to you about. But,
I'll be around.
But I'm thinking also a little bit about Stephen Covey. I'm sure you've kind of looked at his work. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was a really powerful book. I loved it. I actually got to spend a day with him in a convention in a very small group, and it was pretty intense. And I'm wondering if you think there's a perhaps an addendum. Maybe this is the next book you should write, is what's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Millennials? Because at the end of the day, what you're talking about is really interesting, and also it's fascinating to me that you're a Rotarian, that you're engaged in the 4-way test, you're engaged in this concept of service above self. Obviously, ethics is like at the high point, it's the tip of the triangle of being a Rotarian. And I'm wondering if you think also, so this is like a 7-part question, I'm wondering also if you think there's a way that Rotary could be reaching out to millennials to let them see the value of being involved in an organization like this.
What a great question. A book for millennials? They don't read books.
That's not true.
I'm sorry, but my book sales, no, in fairness, videos, TikTok, get them engaged in a story. They love storytelling. That was one of the reasons for the screenplay. Give them a story, and boy, does that engage my audience. So that's a biggie. I told you about our ethics curriculum for Long Beach middle schoolers. 8,000 people a year were going through the program. Not sure since COVID how we're doing, but we're kind of getting them while they're impressionable. And here's the interesting thing. They did, surveys. How did you like this? Teachers loved it, students loved it, the parents loved it. The parents, I'm sorry, but many of us parents don't know how to teach ethics. We just live the values. But are there kind of simple rules? Are there games you can play that kind of encourage you? Can you engage young people? And the answer is yes. And we did, and it's wonderful. Habits of millennials. It's hard. I mean, I'm not a millennial. So when I talk, I don't know. I wouldn't listen to me if I was young. But stories engage. And when you're with your family, kids, grandkids, stories about the old days, maybe not so much, but a story you've heard, something that makes the point you want to make. It's going to hit them emotionally, in the heart. So I think storytelling is the way to go. And Mel's Film Festival of Rotarian Films, maybe we'll get some good stories there. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk about it.
It's tough. Oh, yeah, what part of my question? No, it's great. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
Got one more over here. 2 more.
I don't know if this, I guess it is working. As a millennial, wanted to ask, what is the best advice you guys have for something that feels like a lot of times where people critique millennials and
Yes.
they want to say you need to do this better or that better, and for me it kind of just runs out a year and goes out another because I don't know what that actually means.
Right.
What would be your best advice for them?
Well, first off, to know that every generation tells the generation below it, come on guys, stay with it. I mean, seriously, I don't think we all know that. And it's a pain when you're young, but when you get older, what do they say? Your parents suddenly become smarter when you become a parent. So take it in, dismiss it because they don't know the challenges you face. And it is significant. I listed some of them, but my God, I feel bad. What we've left our millennials is not good. And it's the situation that is the challenge. Now, the principles, the stories, we can tell our children, our grandchildren, hopefully it sinks in and later, they'll be like, oh yeah. But the number one piece of advice, figure out how to trust someone. And the homework we do live sessions every Saturday night for people who are perhaps in a relationship, but they feel lonely, which is possible, by the way. I was in a relationship, felt very lonely. Similarly, you can be alone, but not lonely, okay? The number one thing you gotta do is figure out how to trust. And the number of millennials who write comments on my videos, I don't trust anybody. Everybody's out to get you. Everybody's out to do this. Everybody, and yeah, there's a lot of people like that. But the homework was, do one little thing to try to trust somebody. Do somebody a favor. Ask a favor, or tell them a secret. Those are 2 simple things to just start trust. Get your toe in the trust waters again. So trust somebody. And even if you get betrayed, you're a big boy now. You can deal with it. It's not like you're 3, your whole world changed. Number one thing for all of us is try to open up that aperture of trust just a little. And try to understand, okay, I can deal with this. And it's better to be optimistic. I've been called pathologically optimistic. I love that title. Is that a great title? I get burned regularly, but I'm a big girl and I learn from it. So trust somebody. Trust yourself that you can survive a betrayal. And trust without being stupid. That could be the tagline of my book.
That would be a great title.
It is.
Last one, can you share your social media handles with us?
Yes. Can we have the last slide of my slides?
We'll have to reload it if we can.
Okay.
So
And I have my card here, but my website, my project is Connect, CANNECT, you can connect deeper.me, connect.me. If you go on there, has a lot of stuff about the project, the posse, some stuff about us, my book, and it has a link to my TikTok, but my TikTok is Your Simplifier, YOUR_simplifier. And my tagline, I guess, is I simplify life for you and share adventures. Because I think without connecting deeper, you're not alive. I mean, if these people who are in the hole, they're not going to live, some of them. So connect a little deeper. And also my adventure, that's life. I devour life. It's my license plate. And adventures is living, okay? Your_simplifier.